All right, this video is just going to kind of walk us through a little bit on the latest worksheet I've given you, the Lab 3 Levitation worksheet. So if you go to the share folder that we have under the Superconductor Lab, you'll see the new uh, Google Doc here. So this is a template for the worksheet. So just like you've done for the other ones, what I'll have you do is copy this, and then go through and answer the questions on this. So unlike the other videos, I'm not going to be able to create a video of the actual lab experiment. So that's probably going to be the case for the rest of the lab sessions, because I don't have access to the labs right now. And so I'll try to give you as much overview about the lab and photos and so forth for the images. So the first thing you'll notice is that, again, we weren't able to sort of finish out our own lab experiment. And so for these last worksheets, a lot of the data is going to be from previous semesters. And so that's what we're going to be working with here. So I've taken the data from last year, spring 2019, and it was Monday A groups, just for your information. So also I just gave you some background about how these samples were produced, but the worksheet's going to take you through the rest of it. And so don't worry too much about trying to make conclusions based on earlier experiment we did, because that isn't what we're doing here. So let me just sort of walk you through this worksheet that we're going to do. So the idea is we're going to try to make this as similar to the levitation portion of the experiment as possible. So I've put some images in our folder. So if I go back to the folder here and I go to lab session 4, so this would have been part of lab session 4, and I go to levitation, and then here's the photos from last year. And so I've got a number of photos. These correspond to different pellets that we had in these cases. I've got a couple duplicates, so you can ignore the duplicates there. I think there was just a copying error. So download those. And so the first thing you're going to do is we're going to analyze these photos. And so you've already gone through the ImageJ analysis worksheet with that, so you kind of know how to do that for getting dimensions. And so we're going to do the same thing here. So the first part is asking you to determine the size of the magnet. So you'll notice in the levitation images, so if I open one up that I have, so this 12-hour pellet 1, maybe. There we go. All right, I'm opening up an ImageJ. All right, it's not, it needs to be rotated, but one thing you'll notice, even though it's not rotated right now, is that we have an image, or sorry, we have a magnet. It's a cube magnet, and it's being levitated over this YBCO pellet, which should look familiar. So these just for background, these YBCO pellets are put on some type of support. They're immersed in liquid nitrogen to get them down to roughly 77 K. And then a magnet is placed on top of them with a pair of tweezers, and then we measure, or we take a photo of that with a background ruler. This ruler is plastic, because if we have a metal ruler, the magnet will be attracted to that, and that will ruin our experiment. So that's why we have one of those sort of cheaper plastic rulers. And so that's what we have in the back here. So let me see if I can adjust this to transform. There we go. Oh, wrong way. So I don't use ImageJ a whole lot, so I'm kind of fumbling around with this as you are. So we will. There we go. Okay. So you can go to sort of image, and then we can go to transform and rotate if you need to. You can also rotate the image in other programs if it's easier for you. It doesn't really matter. So this is the image in the right scale, and so same thing as you did with the other types of images. Go through the same procedure you did there to be able to get the distances of this with the YBCO pellet and also the magnet floating on top of it. So again, going back to the worksheet here, the first question is asking you to determine the size of the magnet. So the size of the magnet I'm not giving you here, just as an exercise to double check to make sure that you can use image J. I do give you the strength of the magnet, and this is based on the naming convention that the magnet company has. So N52 tells you the strength according to their scale. So once you have the size, what I'm going to have you do is go to their website, and I put that here. We bought the magnet in English units, so some fractional inch basically, and it's a cubic magnet, cubic block magnet. So I'll have you basically go through their website, and based on the size that you've recorded, see if you can find which magnet it is. So I've got the magnet website up here. So you'll obviously go to products, neodymium magnets. It's a strong neodymium magnet. It's not a disc or a cylinder, it's a block. And so you'll go under here and you'll see a bunch of magnets listed. And so you'll see up here, it gives the strength. So N42, N42, N52. So you'll be looking for one of those. And then it'll also say the size there. So that's what you'll be looking for. You may also see some of them have coloration, or they may be plated different colors. The color really doesn't affect the scale. And so you can kind of ignore that. If you want, you can look at the image as well and see what color it is, but the color is usually just to tell them apart. So you'll look for the size and the magnet strength and see if you can come up with one of those. So I'm just going to pull one of these ones up just to show you what the sheet looks like. So here on this page, they give you a lot of information that's going to be useful when you do the calculations later on. So it's got dimensions, tolerances, the material, all of this sort of information, weight, pole strength, the surface field, temperature, all that. And so this is going to be useful for the later questions. So that's why I have you, if we're going back to the worksheet here, determine all of that. So basically copy down those specifications here. So you don't have to write them out. You could just take a screenshot or whatever, or download a PDF and put it into this document. So that's going to be part 2. Part 3 is going to go back to the images. So all the images you see there in the Google Share Drive folder, you're going to determine the levitation height of the magnet over the YBCO pellet. So as you're doing this, you will note that it is a cubic magnet, and so it may be at varying angles above the pellet. It's not always going to be perfectly flat. Like you can kind of see here, there's an angle. And so I'm going to leave that up to you to how you best determine the height above the magnet. So, this is the magnet surface here, right? And then this is, the YBCO surface, and then this is the magnet. So I'm going to leave it up to you to determine what height that represents. And so that's kind of up to you to determine. As everybody does this, we're going to have some variations in those numbers, and we'll kind of see how that works out. But you can also, when you're going along and filling this worksheet out, make a note of how you determined the levitation height. And I also later on ask for screenshots. So you're going to work through, and that will show me how you actually calculated those heights. So I'm not going to ask for notebook entries. I'm going to ask for screenshots and things from image J to be able to look and see how you calculated the levitation height. All right. So based on that, you're going to come up with levitation heights. So I would recommend making a table of your results with that information. And so the next step is going to be to look at what we expect the levitation height to be. So trying to calculate an equilibrium levitation height. And so this is based on a flux exclusion model. And so if you look in our Canvas folder, you'll see a paper. It's actually titled Flux Exclusion Model. This is the title. It's actually based on another type of superconductors, but it is fine to use this. We're making some assumptions here. And so if you'll read through this, you'll find, and I put this in the slides from last week as well, you'll find an equilibrium height for this flux exclusion model. And so basically this height is given here and we can calculate it. And so go through this equation and look through this paper a little bit to make sure you understand it, but see if you can calculate this height based on the information of our magnet and our system. And so that's why I have you get information about the magnet in problem 2. So you're going to use that information to get the height. So I did put quite a few hints in here because this equation is a little cumbersome and it doesn't tell you a lot of information in the paper. So I'm going to give you those hints here. So units of that equation, they don't specify, but they are in what we call CGS. This is centimeter gram second. And so all of your units should be in centimeter gram second units. And so definitely for each of your values, kind of look at each of those units to make sure it's in a CGS unit. So values, constants, anything you use, want to make sure it's in that. Only then is your height going to come out in centimeters. So everything's kind of based on that. So make sure you have that. The other thing you're going to notice is in the equation, it asks for a radius, and our magnet is a cube. And so here's where we have to make another approximation, is that our magnet is spherical, right? It's cubic, I know, but we're going to have to approximate it as a sphere. So basically what you're going to do is, say you have this cubic magnet. We know the volume associated with it, and we can calculate an equivalent radius. And so that's what I would do, is calculate the volume of the magnet and then calculate an equivalent radius, assuming that our magnet is now a sphere. So obviously there's going to be some variations here, but do that to go through this equation. And the last thing that I recommend here is that they, in the paper, and let me switch back over here, they mention, based on the numbers that they've inputted for magnetization, radius of the magnet, and mass of the magnet, they get a height of 0.44 centimeters. I would strongly recommend that when you're setting up your equation in Excel or whatever you're going to use, that you verify that you can get this number of 0.44 centimeters. That was good when I went through and worked it to make sure that I had everything in the correct units. So if you can get this 0.44 or close to that with this information, then you should be able to extend that to our system where the magnet has a different magnetization, radius, and mass. And so where you're going to get all of those numbers is going to be on the data sheet. It's going to ask for the mass. That's in the data sheet. The radius, you're going to have to calculate the equivalent radius, like I mentioned, and then the magnetization. So here, you'll notice this is in Gauss's. So if I go back to one of these magnets, you'll notice that there is quite a few numbers, but there's only 2 that are in Gauss. The surface field and this BR max. So you're going to want to use the surface field. So this is the field strength at the surface of the magnet. The maximum is not really possible. That's basically when it's 0. It explains it in the info sheet here if you want to go through it. But basically this is never possible. So make sure you use the the surface field when you're looking at the magnetization. So using all those numbers, you should be able to punch those into this equilibrium height and get a value. All right, so that one will probably take a little bit. Again, try to verify the number here first. And so the last part, beyond the showing your work part, is to compare the heights. So you calculate a height based on this flux exclusion model. You calculate heights that were actually represent the magnet over the YBCO pellets. So the idea is, excuse me, how close are they together? Are they the same? Is the height that you measured the same as the one you calculated? If great, that means it completely matched theory, right? Is it less? Is it more? And tell me what that means, right? What does that tell us about the Meissner effect? And remember, Meissner effect is talking about the exclusion of the magnetic field that is being exposed to the YBCO. So think about the magnet height and what that's telling us about the Meissner effect. So compare your results and see what that means. And so you're going to have a number of different heights, and also you can talk about the variations there as well, but try to relate them back to the equilibrium height that you looked at. All right, so that is going to be the assignment that I have you do for this sort of exercise that we would have done in lab. So again, I apologize, we're using old data and not our own. I would have loved to have had our own data, but that's not going to be possible this semester. So work through this. I've given you a week to work on it. It shouldn't take that long, but I just wanted to give you some time to work on that. And I'm going to continue to put together worksheets like this for the remaining characterization units that would have taken place in the 4th and 5th lab units. So stay tuned for those videos and those worksheets.